New World Aeternum changed the weapon skill trees a tiny amount, and since players are struggling with this, I wanted to make a video just kind of going over all of the skill trees in one place, which also just seems like a pretty good resource in general. So if you enjoy the video, if it helps out in any way, don't forget to leave a like, share with your friends, and comment your thoughts down below. Now real quick, I want to show you how this changes nothing about my guides, and that should also help you understand weapon skills a bit better. So with the Greatsword, it's 8 Onslaught, 11 Defiance. With the updated thing for Aeternum, it's 8 Onslaught, 11 Defiance. What they did was they dropped Calamity Counter, so now you just need to put a point up here first, and then the tree fills out. And another reason why this doesn't change is your first 5 to 6 or 7 levels on a weapon are so trivially easy to get. You can just do it with light and heavy attacks, and the skills and abilities don't matter. Like, you just kill a couple of enemies, and then after that, it's the same. And then the rest of my guide is about the perks, gear, and playstyle, with the playstyle being unaffected by little changes like this. My guides are to show you the peak of the build and general playstyle so you can determine if it's worth investing into, so you don't feel bad if you spend all of your money or tons of time and go, oh wait, this kinda sucks, or I actually don't want to play this weapon anymore. And you also don't need to have max level for high proficiency in a weapon in a lot of cases. For example, on the Void Gauntlet, if you're running Void Blade, which is the best way of running the Void Gauntlet, you really don't need anything in Decay since it's about mana regeneration, which isn't a problem once you hit 200 intelligence, and ranged attacks, which you're not using at all. So, like, you just kind of get some primary stuff in, and then you even have room to be able to switch your abilities on the fly to change up for, like, bosses or single target or something. And then everyone's gameplay, situation, roles, and what they want out of the weapon are going to be different, so that's why this is a guide. It provides guidance and gives you an idea of where you should go and what you want to do, and at least the skills to pick if you want to find proficiency. But then the little things such as like, oh, the order that you do it in, that's going to come down to preference, and at some point it's like, yep, I'm just going to be running circles around mobs for a couple of hours to get level 20. I'm learning nothing more about the weapon, and getting a couple stacks of impairment isn't going to make or break my weapon as I'm grinding into the next level. So general rule of thumb is that you want to use your first couple of levels to just rush your abilities since you have a lot of damage there, and then you start practicing cooldowns, and then you want to go for the things that are really helpful. Sometimes it's perks where it's like, wow, while at or below 50% health, you just get 3% lifesteal. It's also going to change depending on your game experience, player progression, and the gear that you have. That early on, if you're starting Flail, you want the 3% lifesteal that you get from Vital Embrace, and then Leader of the Pack. If no allies are around, you just get 15% more base damage, then you can go over here and reduce damage by 4%. That's going to be good if you don't have very strong gear or life-stealing effects on your weapon or leeching on your ring, and then you kind of go for the other things where it's like, oh, reducing cooldown. Yeah, you want 25% cooldown reduction in packs, and then the other benefits, and then you start building into it, and at some point, you hit a high enough level to where your loadout is super clean and super strong, and since I'm a solo player, I don't need better together. So even though this is the ultimate skill, the final thing in the tree you're building up into, it doesn't do anything for me in most situations, so I'm not highly prioritizing it. Your situation may vary, where it's like you read some of the other things, like, wait, better together is just like really good for my group or my raids or whatever else I'm doing with my friends or something. Back to this, so yeah, nothing really changes on Defiance, where it's like, okay, Cleansing Chain, which isn't bad. Hitting with the final attack of the Greatsword Chain reduces debuffs by 10%. You kind of just gotta take it. I don't like this 20% Fortify for 3 seconds every 20% while at full health. Too conditional, too long of cooldowns. We're not running Rupture, so it's like, oh, this just switches a little bit. And then you take out Guarded Shift, because, like, it's not necessary, especially if you're playing, like, proper cooldowns, where it's like, yeah, I can go into Onslaught whenever I want with a heavy attack, and then at some point, my cooldowns are going to come back up, and it's like, yep, there's my counter again, there's my Steadfast, back in defensive. The Greatsword build is heavy attack spam, so if you're spamming heavy attacks, you're going to be going into Onslaught stance, which is kind of a waste if you're just blocking for 2 seconds, and then you start with a heavy attack and you go right back into Onslaught stance. So yeah, like, it's cool to have this, but by losing it, by being forced into Cleansing Chain, you don't really lose anything. And it's just like, yeah, we have durability, we can find a lot of sustain and cooldown reduction, and then we're good. So, Greatsword, really fun. My guide doesn't change at all. Now, I did update my sword guide with the new abilities because it's just that much better. It's not like, oh no, the tree has changed so much, my guide is invalid. It's, wait a second, sword is like, has gone from busted to giga busted. That's probably worth like really explaining to people, since people don't have the IQ to go, wait a second, upheaval, 200% weapon damage and grit, and also gives you cooldown reduction. That's just way better than leaping strike. And then build order is skill, skill, and then whatever it takes to get to the skill. But sword and shield, wait, we're just getting 15% physical armor, and then 10% magic resist, and then something super busted, and then something super busted, where we're getting 20% base damage while like our skill is active, and that's our core tanking skill. You also might notice I don't have the full point investment. That's because the rest is up to you. Do you want to invest in Defender so you get recuperation, which gives you healing and regeneration being increased by 10%? Or do you want to find some other things like, yeah, 10% damage to slowed targets. If you can find slow, that's cool. I don't really care about moving faster while blocking. Do you want to incorporate heavy attacks into your rotation where you can lose a debuff and then also get a little bit of empower? So it's like, oh yeah, lead with a heavy attack, and then you can get 2 whirling blades if the cooldown reset is in your favor, and then you're good to go. The problem is, like, if you're charging that up and you keep getting staggered out, well then you're just like dropping DPS and you're in trouble, especially as a tank, where if you do something and then you end up taunting a lot of enemies on you, you might not have the time or freedom to charge heavy attacks. Also, you should prioritize enchanted move on your sword, so it's like a lot of like quick little light attacks, that way you get the cooldown reduction to reset everything else, and then you just keep popping off on abilities. A lot of people can't cope with the fire staff changes, even though it's the same thing. Yeah, you take a thing, this is already one of your core skills, and then you eventually make it to the core ability. So flamethrower, busted, incinerate, really strong, and then it's like the opposite of sword. We're like, okay, now we're going into the defender tree, we have pillar of fire, and then everything else wants to go in the flamethrower because it's so busted. You get more flamethrower, get higher damage flamethrower, and then it also has no cooldown unless you get knocked out, but then it's only 6 seconds. So yeah, this is, you just get to toggle and then do crazy flamethrower stuff, and then you can bounce around however you want to, where attacks deal 10% increased damage against targets with burn or smolder. Well, all they're doing is getting burned or smolder, so you just find the damage, and then same thing, where it's like, yeah, now this deals more damage for smolder, and our playstyle is unchanged. Now, I think this skill build is like slightly more optimal because we find the Watch It Burn, so we can get extra smolder inside of it, and then we go into our backdraft. But like, backdraft isn't what you're playing for, and when I put a point into it and start like experimenting with it, it feels like you lose a lot of damage because you're getting less smolder damage over time to just get that upfront burst, and it also means like you're spending time with a heavy attack. So if you have no cooldowns, everyone's at max smolder, then you can go for the backdraft, and then with the heavy attack, but again, like, you need to get distance, you need to make sure it charges and you don't get staggered. So like, that doesn't really matter as much as, oh, if you're just going flamethrower, incinerate, pillar of fire, and if your ability rotation is good and you're not getting staggered out of flamethrower, you're pretty much always going to have uptime on your abilities. So you can maybe use backdraft to kind of like speed things up, or again, when like all of your abilities come up at the same time, it's like, yeah, backdraft, and then you immediately get all the smolder, and then it's a little bit of DPS increase. But again, it's not like an, oh, this ultimate ability kind of thing. It's, yeah, it's nice, but the other effects that you find in the tree are just really, really good, and then nothing has changed. So yeah, you get all the little stuff, and then if you want to run Fireball, sure. If you want to run Meteor Shower, sure. I don't like the cast time, even though you can get grit while casting. It's not that crazy for me in practice with what I'm going for, but that's the really cool thing about this game. You can respec your weapon skills whenever you want. So if you want to try Fireball and Meteor Shower and some kind of other combination, you can. And then you can realize if it's better or not after I've given you the guidance to understand the core fundamentals and goals of the Fire Staff. Same thing on the Life Staff, that there's multiple playstyles to the Life Staff, and nothing really changed here, where it's like, cool, you start Sacred Ground, you go Orb, you go Keen, and it's actually better for the first couple of levels to do the build, even with the things kind of getting shifted around a little bit. And again, we don't have full points invested because it's going to be about your situation, your goals with the Life Staff, which are going to be a lot different than any other weapon goal, because like, you're stuck on Life Staff. You are stuck on focus. You only exist to keep healing and playing around the cooldowns, and then the auto attacks to splash in some healing, and then you keep healing, and you only exist to heal without any autonomy for yourself. So whatever you're struggling with and whatever the group needs and whatever your playstyle on life staff just naturally goes towards is what you should be focusing on with this. So you should also be reading what's in the skill tree and applying it to your situation. And then the other build is like, yeah, you just go mostly healing tree over here, and then a couple other things if you want it. After dodge, 20% more effective for 5-second healing. If you are just like dodging attacks or something, maybe you block and that gives you a little bit of mana. And then it kind of makes things like weird with what you're doing. Do you want Splash of Light, or do you just find Beacon a better Splash of Light because you can extend the duration to 15 seconds, which is crazy? Or do you want to play like Soraka with pristine clutch healing that whenever someone gets low, they get like super duper giga buff heals on a really low cooldown, and that goes into weapon perks, which are going to be another big thing for consideration about your playstyle. Because if we go back to the Fire Staff, the reason I show the abilities I do for the Fire Staff is that I like the perks a lot better. That we have Empowering Incinerate, where it just deals more damage to targets with a burn, which they're going to have from the Pillar of Fire, and then you can also get the cooldown on the Pillar of Fire. So if it's on your weapon or even your armor, it's like, wow, 20% refresh on Pillar of Fire, and then some other things can give us cooldown reduction. And then we have the Empowering Incinerate, so like you just dunk everything, and then, oh, by the way, Pillar of Fire is back up, boom. The Empowering Meteor Shower is also crazy, where it gives you, you know, a high percentage of Empower for the hits. Again, I don't like the casting, I don't like the area, and then you can get like shoved out, or you might have to reposition. Same thing on the Fireball, where it's like, wow, we just get the boom. And then when I'm playing with it, it's like, it doesn't feel as crazy as some of the other stuff. And then Life Staff, your perks are going to determine a lot about your ability selection and your playstyle. Where like Mending Protection, you get X outgoing healing power for 3 seconds if Orb of Protection heals an ally below 50%. So a lot of below 50% clutching, to where like Mending Protection on your weapon sounds grief, but then you get 3 seconds of 46% outgoing healing. That's kind of crazy, just because you tag someone with the orb, which I also like for being auto-cast. Keen Beacon and Mending Protection, like you just press the button and then it's a skill shot, and it just happens. What I don't like about Splash of Light and Divine Embrace is that there is that channeling time, so it's more like, oh yeah, your group's in there, your tank is drawing aggro and threat and stuff, and then you're just kind of like hanging, channeling things the entire time, and then hopefully it's able to be like, and hopefully you can still clutch without missing a heal because it's channeling or something. So I like that you can at least find some autonomy for yourself. Keen Beacon, though, is also kind of a must, where it's like, yep, you give everyone 11% crit if it's on your weapon, can be on your armor, depending on what you're going for. And then even Divine Embrace, if it's used on target below 50% health, the cooldown is reduced by a hefty amount. 45% up to 73%, and it also restores some mana, so if you're having mana problems, this could cure what ails you. And then Fortifying Sacred Ground, also really good to give Fortified. And then we have Purity of Light. If you remove a debuff with Splash of Light, then they just get a fatter heal on top of it. That goes down to this one. So Splash of Light removes a debuff when it heals an ally. So a lot of stuff to go for inside of it. And then you have the Savior perk over the Blessed perk on weapons. So yeah, healing, it goes deep, but you have to like all in on that. Hammer, I really like the hammer. My video on the hammer just kind of shows like the secret way to play it that no one understands is that you just keep refreshing Mighty Gavel, and it's just the most damage in the game most consistently in a very strange way. It also kind of goes back to no one understanding the Void Gauntlet. And I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit because no one understands the Void Gauntlet. It's not about debuffs. If you run Void Blade, you are a DPS. You are an insanely high DPS. Anyone that's kicking a Void Blade, Void Gauntlet for DPS is an idiot. They just do not understand the game because they're an NPC that is like over-reliant on guides. It's just peak midwit of someone that doesn't understand anything about the game, copy-pasting whatever they think sounds better to them the most, and then enforcing it on others, and then just a chain of that. Or maybe some creator that doesn't have game sense or hasn't experimented enough just kind of like said it, and then it kept getting propagated around, even though like no one really tested it. and now it just kind of leads to a lot of like stupid outcomes. So we'll talk about the Void Gauntlet a little more in a bit, but it shows that even though the game has been out for 3 years, there's an unbelievable amount of ignorance and stupidity, and that also goes into the general MMO community, where it's like, oh no, the hammer is about crowd control. It's like, or you can also have crowd control and then just be like the most damage in a pack of enemies out of any weapon, and you do really fun, crazy stuff with this. And no one discovered that but me, and then people are like, whoa, yeah, I have to change my build a little bit because this just looks better than what I've been running for the last couple of years, and I've been primary hammer. And then other people come in and say, you're running the hammer wrong. It's like, well, that's just an idiot that can't be saved, even with guides, and for some reason they're looking up guides. Hatchet. It's all Berserker. The reason why this isn't fully invested is because, like, maybe I missed a small angle somewhere in my video by not considering any throwing, because actually, you do get 5% melee attack crit over in the throwing tree. Didn't consider that. And then you just kind of have to, like, take whatever to get exploitation, where it's like 10% base damage on a debuff. If your secondary weapon is putting down a lot of long-lasting debuffs, or you're just in group content where everyone's, like, all the enemies are just going to soak debuffs as well, this is just free a lot of damage. And it also means, like, yeah, heavy attack, we're not really doing much of that. Heavy attack for Fortify or Empower. I guess, like, you go Berserk, lead a heavy attack, and then you just, like, spam light attacks for the refreshing move. So it's like, there's nothing. You hit Berserk, you turn your brain off, and then you get one get out of jail free card every 60 seconds, and then you choose weapon perks or armor depending on what feels like it would be the most successful with how you've been playing on the Hatchet, and then you don't need level 20 to understand what the Hatchet does. You just 1, 2, 3, max out to uninterruptible, eventually you get Defy Death, and then nothing else matters on the Hatchet. Some of these just don't matter. Now, I haven't done a Blunderbuss guide, and I actually leveled the Blunderbuss to level 20 because I was trying to go for like a Greatsword Blunderbuss build or a Greataxe Blunderbuss build and maybe get some PvP out of it. That, like, you want Claw Shot and Net for PvP, but my guides are more focused on like PvE and group content and stuff, and just kind of enjoying the game for yourself. So you want Shrapnel Blast because leeching Shrapnel Blast is an amazing perk that kind of gives you survivability, which, like, as a melee ranged character, you're not finding like the crazy sustain and durability effects of something like a two-handed weapon. You don't have the safety or just absurd damage of an intelligence weapon. So you need to find a couple things. Then also you get some cool stuff at the end where, like, you get a single bomb down the center. So, like, you get right up inside of someone and then you, like, melee point blank it. You get a lot of boom. You get a lot of burst. I'm not a big fan of Blast Shot. This is more PvP. So it's like, yeah, you're just stuck on Splitting Grenade and Mortar Charge, and then you just kind of spec out how it feels. You get some cool stuff where it's like, oh, successful hits give you Fortify, Reload gives you damage boost, Last Shot has more damage. This is really cool. Triggering an ability grants Fortify for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So, like, if you're just running around kiting in melee range, which is actually, like, something that the Blunderbuss does, where you're just running circles around something like boom, boom, boom. You get, like, a really cool thing where, like, you're just on a roll and you just keep it going. Using ability reduces other ability cooldowns by 4%. And then Splitting Grenade, Mortar Charge, and you just cast things and try to be successful. And for the perks, it's what my other videos talk about, that you find like 2 core things in the Blunderbuss case. It's Refreshing Move, Enchanted, and then a third thing. It can be your perk ability that you really want to amp up with Leeching Shrapnel Blast. Now, if you have the Blood Drinker or a lot of Lifesteal, it's not as necessary, and you can still go Lifesteal Enchanted on a Blunderbuss. And then for the third one, I think like Mortal Power is really good, or some kind of mortal effect. That way it's like, yeah, you can just keep that snowball going. Game's not hard, guys. Greataxe, I've talked in depth about the Greataxe in my video, talking about how the skill changes don't matter. In my Greataxe video, where really you just want to get your core abilities, so you 1, 2, 3, 4, that didn't really change at all, 5, and then you find these other effects where, like, if you have healing on low health targets, you're staying alive forever. That's the point. Use all of your abilities, they get low, you're trading health with the enemy, and then you stay alive by getting all of these extra healing effects. That Reap gives 30% healing, hits twice, so if they get low, like, you want to save your Reap for when they're at 30%, and then you pull in 3 enemies, you spin around, and then you get half your health back, and then you just stay alive. You can also heal on crits, and then you can get more crits on low health enemies, and then you actually heal to full on burst, and then you fill out the rest of this because there's just cool stuff. And Mauler's Fury, it works with Whirlwind, it works with your abilities, so eventually you just like spin into a group, do some attacks and abilities. Now you got 30% power for a bit. There you go. Ice Gauntlet. I never found any of this stuff to be actually useful. Like, again, if you have a Blood Drinker, which is one of the core items you should be aiming for, you don't need Entombed, and then that just opens up other abilities, and if you're just, like, safely hanging out inside of tons of enemies, getting all kinds of other benefits, you're good. So as we talked about, once you hit 200 intelligence, mana is no longer a problem because you're critting nonstop and then you're getting mana back on crits. So you just throw out all of your stuff, you get crits, and then all of your mana comes back. You can also switch into another intelligence weapon like the Fire Staff, like the Void Gauntlet, and then you can get mana back through that, where it's like, yeah, you drop all this, go Void Gauntlet, which heals or which restores mana on the orb, and then everything is fine. So like you actually have crazy amounts of damage by doing this instead of being like a zoner, utility, kiter. It's actually not good. And you can actually find a little bit of tankiness over here where it's like, oh, we get some Fortify. Cooldown reduction when casted in a frosted area. So this utility over here is pretty nice. Once you have like all of your primary weapons and damage spec'd out, and then your ice damage just does more to enemies. Neat. Void Gauntlet. Just copy paste this and shred. If you're playing Void Gauntlet early on and you're trying to build into 200 intelligence, you want the Draining Orb. That way you can try to hit multiple enemies, get all of your mana back, and then, hey, no mana problems. Slowing Orb, that's just there for like adding another debuff and then getting some kind of utility on it. But it's really just like, yep, you get Void Gauntlet. There's a lot of healing and leeching effects inside of it. You pop all those and then you just win. And like I said, all the other effects are something we are not playing for at all, so it means you can just put in whatever, and like you don't even need Draining Orb at 4 if you have no mana problems. But this is all, like, the Draining Orb is mostly here, like, if you're running another intelligence weapon, so that way it's like, yep, I can just throw everything, and if I'm not getting enough for crits or my casts are too high because I just used 6 mana abilities, Draining Orb gives it all back. Then you're good to go, and then this is like, okay, I can take off, Orb of Decay, I can put in Baleful Tether or Essence Rupture for like the boss or named enemy. You can just remap your abilities instead of resetting your tree every time you want to like change up for a specific scenario. Void Gauntlet's just busted, guys. And then Spear, again, Spear doesn't really change, where it's like we are a crazy single target and we're going for big heavy attack poke, and it's going to take a while to get there. While you're leveling it, if you're running into crowds of enemies, yeah, you got to put points in Cyclone. Then you have Sweep. Sweep Skewer with the knockdown damage is disgusting. Bleeding Sweep, Fortifying Perforate, the perk for Skewer, the Leeching Cyclone, it's all really good. And then at some point, you just like find the combo and it's super duper strong. Go Gavel Hammer Spear, run it like this, and you're going to be like super duper happy. Now you might notice, a couple things out here don't have points. That's because these are the weirdo weapons. I don't touch or consider the weirdo weapons too much, and they have different playstyles where it's like the Rapier, you just do all this stuff, and maybe like one of these, yeah, exactly, like some of these 5 over here are going to matter once you like all in on Grace, and maybe there's something you don't want, but it's like you want Haste, Critical Strikes, reducing cooldown, basically like, I think you actually just max everything out here. Because you're running this for open world PvP. You pester someone with the bow or the musket, and then when they get on you, you do all of this like unavoidable crap, and then you just dunk on them. Flurry over the lunge is also pretty good, and then it rounds out your damage, and that's kind of it. PvE, like, yeah, you can actually just kind of go all in on this tree instead, and then you're just like super bleed poking things, and that can also have a lot of damage as well. So it's kind of like a one-handed spear in that regard. As for the musket, I don't know, like traps and sticky bomb are actually bad. I have a level 20 musket on my main because I wanted to make the mechanic work. It's like, yo, but like mending sticky bombs, I'm getting all these other like ability cooldowns. I can just throw like 20 bombs at people and one-shot them as though I'm headshotting them. No, it does not work that way. So I don't know if like anyone's running shooter stance or if it's actually just stopping power, power shot, powder burn. I don't know how the musket works. I just like eat a powder burn to the dome and take like 60%, and then it's like easy to finish me off. And I already did a guide about weapon perks, so it's like the weapon perks are all that matter. You go an attunement, Vorpal, and then I forget, like keenly jagged, and then they just like get double burned and take elemental damage and just dissolve. Same thing with the bow. I'm getting hit from too far away for all of my health to even know like what's going on and what people are trying to do. Also, I think the bow is pretty perk heavy. Like, you get hit with a poison shot, so the retaliation isn't there. Evade shot. Oh, you just keep getting more stamina and cooldown, and you can just, like, leap out of an attack that's coming your way, and then you can dodge, and then you get all of your shirking buffs. Lasting rain of arrows. Sometimes I just see it out in the battlefield, but it's not what people are doing. Armor penetration on rapid shot. Refreshing penetrating shot. This is more like the PvE one, and then empowering explosive arrow. So, like, explosive, and then headshot, and then other abilities. I don't know. I know you're a PvPer, but you should have enough brain cells to click buttons and then try things and then adjust it where it's like, this feels good. I'm going to focus on things that make the playstyle more like this. This feels bad. I'm going to respec and figure it out. So there we go. That's all the weapon skill trees in New World Aeternum. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.